ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकाय चक्षुरुन्मिलितमेन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टां स्थापितमेन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरुं श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं श्रीकृष्णचैतन्यदेवं राधाकृष्णपादान् सहगण ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्त राधा कान्त नमोऽस्तुते। तप्ता काञ्चन गौरङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानन्द श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवास आदि गौर भक्तवृन्द। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। नमो नमो अनिरुद्धाय ऋषिकेशेन्द्रियात्मने, नमः परमहंसाय पूर्णाय निवृत्तात्मने, स्वर्गपवर्गद्वाराय नित्यं शुचिसदे नमः। नमः हिरण्यवीर्याय चातुर्होत्राय तान्तवे। Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for joining us. This is a continuation of the series of lectures that we had set up, a series of 4 lectures, hopefully, 4 classes, dealing with the subject of being able to eliminate, remove obstacles on the path of being able to effectively engage in devotional service. And in the previous session, we want to start there just to set the stage so that we are very clear about how we are going to proceed. In the previous session, we identified the issue by starting our discussion with a very specific verse from the Bhagavad Gita. And the verse was 4.24, 4th chapter, 24th verse, Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavir, Brahmagnav, Brahmanahutam, Brahmaivatena Gantavyam, Brahma Karma Samadhina. The translation is, a person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. The most critical statement, or rather, the most critical word which is being used here, which we need to pay attention to understand the import of this verse, is a person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom. And then the verse says, because of his full contribution in spiritual activities. So let's stop there. Full contribution in spiritual activities is practically a situation where our entire focus and our energies and our entire planning for the future, our entire environment and everything is being arranged specifically for us to be able to move forward in Krishna consciousness. So what is the present state of most practitioners? Most practitioners of devotional service, specifically in our movement, most practitioners of the chanting of the holy names, the fundamental challenge which most practitioners face is the challenge of full absorption. So almost 80%, 60 to 80% of our energy is practically employed in fighting our senses when we sit down to chant japa. Mahaprabhu has given us an extraordinarily simple process for us to be able to achieve the goal. The goal is for us to come to a complete understanding of who we are in relationship to Krishna. Who is Krishna to us and who are we to Krishna? What is a specific relationship? And in that relationship, How do I interact with Krishna? So fundamentally, the four interactions of Krishna with us is actually classified into four fundamental mellows. The mellows that our acharyas talk about are the mellow of your friendship, right? Dasya, servitude, the mellow of friendship, Sakya, the mellow of Vatsalya, which is parental love towards Krishna, and then the relationship of, Madhurya or Shringar, which is the relationship that the man and wife, or a woman and man would have, the intimacy that is enjoyed by boyfriend and girlfriend, so to speak. Now, the point which we are trying to make here is that these are fundamental classification of relationships which one can have with Krishna. Now, the idea and the objective of Bhakti Yoga, the objective of the chanting of the holy names, it's always good for us to reflect on the goal, is for us to ultimately reach the point of being able to understand our specific relationship, and then our relationship involves assuming a certain identity in the spiritual sky, just as much as every one of us has an address, every one of us has certain identification when we are existing in this body. I have a name, I have a spiritual name, I have a legal name, I have perhaps a title in a professional organization, I have perhaps a relationship with different relatives. All of this is nothing but a reflection of the spiritual sky. It is perverted. So in reality, we all have extraordinarily detailed, very dynamic relationships in the spiritual sky, which are far, far more profound because of their eternal nature and because of purity, the purity of being Krishna-centered. So ultimately, Bhakti Yoga, or our pursuit of Krishna consciousness and the chanting of the holy names, has to culminate and reach the point of us being able to understand who we are in relationship to Krishna. Okay? That requires an absorbed practice of sadhana. Absorption requires 100% delineation of our energy towards the pursuit of serving Krishna. Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam. Anukulyena, favorable service to Krishna, where that becomes classified as Uttama Bhakti, favorable service. But in reality, what we are facing in the early stages of Krishna consciousness, we are all facing the obstacle which is described in the first two lines of Srila Rupa Goswami's verse. We are facing obstacles because of distractions. First of all, Anyabhilashita Shunyam is a requirement where we have absolutely no other abhilasha, no other objective other than wanting to chant the holy names. We have a problem there because we have so many different objectives, we have so many different goals, and we have extraordinarily mixed up attitude towards what is important and what is not important. So our fundamental issue is there. Number two, Jnana Karmadi Anavritam. If you're going to put energy into resolving the 150 goals that we have, which are not connected to Krishna, that energy is not available for full absorption to Krishna. So that's the other fact which our acharyas are talking about. Fundamentally, Srila Rupa Goswami is saying, Anyabhilashita Shunyam, you have to reach a state. You have to reach a state of being able to chant, and you have to reach an inner mental state where our mind is not being distracted to such an extent that Krishna's, we are not able to absorb ourselves in serving the holy names. Our energies are so distracted, it is dissipated in different directions. We call it refraction. We practically have a medium which is somewhat opaque, somewhat distorted, and then when we pass light through it, then it gets completely refracted. It's all over the place. It does not have a laser-like focus. It does not produce the desired effect of being able to, be productive for us. In a similar fashion, our own effort is not fully absorbed. Why so? Srila Rupa Goswami is saying, because you have Anya Abhilasha. You have Anya Abhilasha. You have other Abhilashas. You have objectives which are not just focused on Krishna. That is number one. Then he is saying you need to have a singular goal of being able to focus on Krishna. You also need to be able to completely free yourself from the objective of wanting to engage in sense gratification, gratifying the body. Okay? And this is the real issue which devotees face. Devotees face the issue of a lack of complete absorption because their energies are diverted in different directions. Because the energies are they were diverted in so many different directions, their capacity for complete absorption is very less. So there are distractions. So number one, we have many other objectives. That's the first principle which is coming out of this. Second principle is, since we have so many objectives and we are attached to those objectives, then we start pursuing them. Now, when we start pursuing objectives which are unrelated to Krishna, which are anarthas, then our energy, our ability, our life force, our prana, it's all being directed, dissipated. And as a consequence, what is really required is not going in. So, what is the typical life of a sadhaka in the beginning of Krishna consciousness? Typical life of sadhaka in the beginning of Krishna consciousness is 80% of the time trying to put energy to control the senses. 80% of the time. 20% of energy goes towards serving Krishna. Okay? So the second part of that verse, Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam, only 20% goes there. 80% is Anya Balashita Shunyam Jnana Karmadi Anavritam, just trying to implement a lack of other objectives and distractions, just trying to implement a situation where we are able to effectively engage in, completely freeing ourselves from, engaging in jnana and karma. Both of these, which are not required, because these are not something which are considered to be distractive. One is for the purpose of enjoying, the other is for the purpose of not suffering. Neither of these are objectives. We are not here to either enjoy in certain ways or not suffer. So the whole idea is for us to be able to cultivate a mindset which is more focused. Okay. Now Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita has a similar issue. His mind in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita is completely distracted. It is completely distracted to the point where he is suffering. He is focusing on the results of his activity. What would happen if I were to fire arrows at Bhishma? This would be the extent of my suffering. What would happen if Sri Dronacharya were to pass away? This would be the extent of my suffering. There would be suffering to the kingdom. There would be suffering to people. There would be mental suffering because people will blame me. There would be infamy. He just has tremendous amount of mental suffering in the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. What does Krishna do in the second chapter? In the second chapter, Krishna starts attacking the issue. He starts attacking the issue by bringing the main issue front and center. He first of all says that if your mind is going to go in different directions, and if you're not going to be focused in one particular direction, which is for you to be able to perform your duty, then you are going to accumulate reactions. You see, if you're constantly going to focus so much on obtaining results and not being able to focus on your duties, you're going to obtain reactions. So Krishna starts attacking the very core of the issue which Arjuna is facing in the second chapter. He starts going for the mind. Okay. Now, if we put ourselves in the similar shoes or similar circumstances, that is exactly our problem. Our entire energy is completely dissipated. We constantly focus on what is comfortable and not comfortable to the body, to the senses. We are constantly focusing on meeting the desires that are of the senses that are being stimulated by the environment that we are in. So we are in an environment which is filled with passion. We are in an environment which is filled with tamas, ignorance. And that environment keeps hitting our body, our senses in different ways. And as a consequence, we are also being put into passion, right? So if you take an iron rod, Srila Prabhupada used to say, and you place it in fire, the iron rod will absorb the quality of the fire when we become equal to the fire. In a similar comparison, if we place ourselves in an environment which is filled with passion, and if we don't understand it properly, then we start absorbing the environment and we become a part of that environment. We start fitting in. We start enjoying the environment just as anybody else does. And we start plugging in, starting to respond to the environment. Oh, this environment begs this kind of behavior. This environment begs this kind of impulse. We make a lot of changes based on the environment if we do not understand our own goals. So what is the primary purpose of Krishna speaking the second chapter? we are going to go to a key verse before we go into the main topic of today's discussion. We want to set the stage of where the problem is. The fundamental issue which we are trying to resolve, again, for those of you who have joined now, the fundamental issue which we are trying to resolve is the fact that in Krishna consciousness, 80% of our energy in the early stages is simply dissipated in fighting our senses and fighting our mind. 20% is contributed to real Krishna consciousness. 80% just goes away in fighting. It is extraordinarily unproductive, very unproductive. We sit down to chant, and so many thoughts come into our mind. Thoughts start bothering us in so many different ways. And our whole business during the chanting session is more in terms of controlling the mind. Let me put some attention to the mind. Let me control the mind. Let me channel the mind. And we can't really hear the Maha Mantra directly. We cannot really become absorbed in japa when all the energy is being dissipated in simply trying to keep our mind away from the pull of the senses, keep our mind away from accepting and rejecting the environment. This is exactly what goes on. You see? This is where it is. So now what do we want to do? We want to be able to have an external strategy. We want to have an external strategy. And the external strategy has to be combined with an internal process. Okay? We want to have an external strategy, and there has to be an internal process, both. We spoke about it. An external strategy, before you enter into a battlefield, would be for you to understand what is your goal. Doesn't it make sense? Does it not make sense that before we enter into a complex situation, you sit down and reflect on what is the goal of life? What is the goal of the purpose for which you're engaging yourself in that organization? What is the purpose for which you're going to work? What is the purpose for which you are exposing yourself to passion and ignorance? Have we reflected on it? Do we have a goal? Do we have a timeline until such time we are going to expose ourselves to such elements? You see? Do we have a plan? It's very important. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because this is external aspect. This is strategy. You need to be able at any given time to write down why you are going to work. How many years do you plan to work? What is the amount of money you plan to save? How is the money going to be used? And whether all these things fit in with keeping Krishna in the center. Does it really fit in with keeping Krishna in the center? Do I have my objectives correct? You know, if my whole objective is to go from 80-20, 80% distraction, 20% absorption, if I want to reverse the strategy and make it 80% absorption and 20% distraction, that should be the goal. How do I achieve that mix some point in the future before it's too late? How do I achieve this particular mix of 80-20, 80% absorption, 20% distraction that I can handle? How do you achieve that mix? If we do not write down why we are going to work, how many years do you want to work? What is the purpose? What is the amount of money you earn? Is there a way to optimize your time while you're at work? Is there a way for you to handle all those situations and then come back unscathed? That should be our strategy. And that is where Bhagavad Gita is so important. What is the fundamental distraction of Arjuna? The fundamental distraction of Arjuna is he does not know in the first chapter as to why he is fighting the opposition. He does not know. He is bewildered. He really does not know, why am I supposed to kill Bhishma? Why am I supposed to kill Drona? What is the point in, overcoming my enemies? What is the point in my being winning? What is the purpose of my being there? That purpose is not known to Arjuna. That bewilderment leads to inaction. And then once it leads to inaction where you do nothing, the whole environment falls on our head and it starts dictating its terms, which is what we observe with Arjuna. He says, I'm overwhelmed. He drops the Gandiva. He drops his bow. He drops his arrow. He says, I cannot act. And we become overwhelmed because the environment acts upon us, because the environment practically is overcoming us. The external environment that we're dealing with needs a lot of thought process before you engage in it. We cannot blindly go. We cannot really make that statement that this is surrender. Surrender means no thinking. This is a common misconception amongst even Vaishnavas, devotee circles. Surrender means no thinking. Surrender means no planning. Surrender means nothing. Surrender means I do nothing. Krishna has to do all the heavy lifting. He has to take care of situations. He has to come. He has to help. He has to do everything. This is the normal distraction or lack of understanding which even devotees possess. Why is it that you're desiring a promotion? Have we thought about it? Why is it that you're desiring that you want to move from one city to the other? Why is it that you're desiring that you want a certain kind of role in your organization? Does it in any way going to impact, or have you really analyzed that from the perspective of the 80-20 mix we spoke of? 80% distraction, 20% absorption. Does it impact that? How is it going to impact that? How is it going to improve that? Is there going to be a favorable outcome if I were to put some thought into it? So that is something which is going to be very critical. That is something which every one of us because we are exposed to the outside world, it is because we are exposed to the elements. Every one of us have to pay attention, and we have to be able to have a clear concept that for me to reverse this 80-20, I would need an environment which is of a certain kind. We want to be able to reflect and understand that I need an environment. Some of us are designed to live in the city. Some of us are designed to live in the countryside. That is our internal design. Some of us, by nature, are Brahmanical. By nature, we are predominantly in the mode of goodness. We can survive in an environment like the countryside, which is the mode of goodness. Some of us are very passionate. As a consequence, we have an issue if we go to the mode of goodness, which is the countryside, because there the action may not be there. So we can't really go to a farm and say that we're going to be in a farm. So those are the kind of things which require a lot of thought process, saying, this is my nature, I need engagement, I need to be able to act, I need to be able to be effectively doing things for Krishna. So what is it which I prefer? So where is it where we want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Because if you do not have such a plan, we are again and again exposing ourselves to the environment which is not designed to help us. We are going to be exposing ourselves to the 80% distraction problem. Now imagine if you have a plan, if you write down why you're going to work, if you know that you have certain objectives, and then you want to achieve certain financial objectives, you want to be able to reverse this situation in some way or the other. You want to become absorbed more and more in Krishna consciousness. You want to give more time towards Krishna consciousness than less. That's the objective. That's where the 80-20 can be reversed. Okay? Wherever we are, some of us could be having affinity towards city life, towards village life, whatever it is. 80-20 can be achieved if our own activity is predominantly centered towards Krishna consciousness in a proper way. Okay, this is the external strategy. This is required until we reach the stage where it doesn't matter where we are. There is a stage in Krishna consciousness where the identity of relationship with Krishna has fully blossomed. That identity of relationship with Krishna has fully blossomed. As a consequence, the devotee who is advanced can go anywhere and can execute. And this is the reason why we read about it in different shastra, saying for one who is advanced, it really doesn't matter. You see, it really doesn't matter where they are, because they can be anywhere. They can function. You see, they can go anywhere, they can function, because the environment will not affect them. But until such time, we need plans, we need strategy, so that we can manage the environment based on our terms. And what are our terms? How do we operate? We first write down what our objectives are. We are very clear as to why we are going to work and what is being achieved, and so on and so forth. We have objectives which are completely Krishna-centered, and the main objective of being Krishna-centered is to reverse the 80-20 in such a way that there's only 20% distraction and there's 80% absorption in being able to engage in japa and being able to engage in service and so on and so forth. You see, that is the main core objective which every devotee should have, because we have come in touch with such a powerful process. We have come in touch with such a unique and extraordinary movement. And in the previous week, we spoke of it. We said very clearly that none of us are qualified. Nobody is qualified. The Shastra does not even mention, because of the confidential nature of our worship, it does not even mention openly the name of Srimati Radharani. Doesn't. And our acharyas have specifically taken us to Vraja, where the center of Vraja is Sri Sri Radha Govinda. The center of Vraja is Sri Sri Radha Govinda. Everybody is serving Sri Sri Radha Govinda, right? Or Sri Sri Radha Shyam Sundar. That is the center of Vraja. So the point we want to make here is that we are into a very confidential process, and it's a unique process. It requires work. We have to come to terms with the fact that we have been given something special, and we cannot deal with it as we would deal with mundane religion. This is not like going once a week to Sunday and going to the temple and coming. This is not what we used to do before we came in, isn't it? This is our lifestyle. This becomes our goal. This is what we are trying to gear towards. What is it which is our primary achievement? 80-20. 80% absorption, 20% possible distraction, because the senses, they can be stimulated because of the environment. That should be our first objective. We want to reverse the existence problem. That is our first objective, okay? And that requires having a plan. So now, assuming that we have a plan, how is our mind going to work at work and when we go to the workplace in a professional environment? When we go to the workplace, we would be very driven because we would have very clear thoughts that, okay, I have a certain objective, and that objective has Krishna in the center. That is going to allow me a greater level of absorption, a greater level of involvement in seva. And by doing so, I would be able to make substantial progress in a shorter period of time, because the goal is for me to understand who I am in relationship to Krishna. Now, when we reflect on this on a daily basis before we go to work, then that particular work day becomes meaningful. Why? Because it's worthwhile. The grind at work, the mundane, aspects of it, all of it becomes meaningful because now you have an objective for which you're going there. Okay? You've established your identity. Even at a basic level, you've established your identity saying, I want to know who I am in relationship to Krishna. And after knowing such, I want to be able to serve him wonderfully. I want to become more absorbed so that I can reach that stage quickly. So this objective is very clear. As a consequence, you start arranging life around that objective. And what we do is we do all our planning. We accept the environment that we are in. We tolerate the environment. We accept it. We tolerate it. We do not desire in that environment things which are not going to help us achieve our objectives. We accept it. We tolerate it. And after making all these plans, we submit ourselves to Krishna, because he is the one who is going to be giving us results. The results are not going to be controlled by us. Now, this is specifically a situation which is manageable, because at the very least, you have some objective of wanting to achieve the 80-20 absorption in Krishna consciousness, 20% distraction ratio at some point. Krishna, who is in the heart, recognizes that. Krishna will start helping us because he recognizes, saying, okay, now you're planning, now you have a goal, now I'm going to assist you. Okay? And that becomes a very, very big deal. He's going to assist us. And then he will make changes to our plan. We might have a plan of achieving $1 million. That can happen. People make $1 million, $500,000, $2 million, all those plans can be made. He will take his pencil and he will make changes to that plan, saying, okay, this is what you think you need, but this is what I think you need. You see, this is what you want, but this is what I think you need. Our wants versus Krishna thinking, this is what we need. Those changes will happen. But ultimately, what is the end result? The end result would be very conducive, because one way or the other, we will reach a position of being able to have a lot of absorption and a lot of opportunity for us to be able to serve with very minimal level of distraction. That should be the objective. And if those objectives are not written down, we end up going to the workplace. We start getting stimulated by the environment. That environment is full of mundane passion mixed with ignorance. Mundane passion will produce desires. Mundane passion will also produce attachment to such desires. And then because mundane passion produces desires, produces attachment to the desires, those desires will not be fulfilled because they are mundane, they're designed to fail. They may not be fulfilled. And if they don't get fulfilled, we go from passion, ignorance, to complete ignorance. We become disappointed, we become depressed, we become angry, we become, all kinds of negative behavior starts coming into us because we made a certain plan and that did not get executed. This is a typical life of those of us who go to work because we make plans based on the passionate environment that we are in. That passion dictates attachment. That attachment, in turn, allows us to develop unwanted desires. Those unwanted desires invariably will not get fulfilled. Why should they get fulfilled, anyways? Okay? They may not get fulfilled. That leads to our becoming disappointed. And our becoming disappointed makes us angry, makes us frustrated. Right? And all of this is seen when we wake up and we want to chant. Because passion, ignorance, is not going to encourage us to grab the beat bag, sit down, and then start chanting. Passion and ignorance is not going to allow us to do that. This is a typical cycle of someone who is exposed to the elements outside. We have all gone through those experiences, and every one of us can relate to it. So this is the external strategy. Now let's go to what Krishna says on how to handle this. Okay, so I'm going to present the question which Arjuna asks, and I'm going to share the answer which Krishna is giving to this particular predicament. And what is again the goal? 80% of our time and energy is going away in fighting the impulses of the mind. 80% of our energy goes in simply trying to bring the mind to focus. There is 20% absorption. And since there's only 20% absorption, it's very difficult for us to build enough potential or critical mass for us to be able to leverage and for us to be able to move forward. Everything requires good quantity, isn't it? We need good quantity of resources. Spiritual resources are also resources, and those spiritual resources are very minimally accumulated by devotees because 80% of the time goes in fighting the senses. You sit down for japa, and then, I'm supposed to do this for work. Did I answer that email? Maybe my boss is meeting today, whether it's going to be all right, it's not going to be all right, whether the budget is going to be approved, whether I will be there, not be there. 150 questions come up. 80% of the time, we are fighting those questions in our head. 20% of the time, we are having the ability to absorb ourselves. Okay? Now we want to reverse it. Again, I want to ensure that we emphasize why we are doing this. We want to reverse the 80% distraction, 20% absorption to the other way around. 80% absorption, 20% we will give some amount of distraction because we are a part of this world, and it needs to be tolerated. Okay? So that's our objective. Now let's go to the verse where Arjuna is being answered, and then we will look at the solution from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now we are still in the Bhagavad Gita. We'll go into the Bhagavatam after looking at the problem which Arjuna is raising. Okay? Now this is 2.54. After finally being chastised by Krishna, after finally being put in his place by Krishna, and after being subdued intellectually, saying, Arjun, what are you talking about? Intellectually, Krishna is subduing Arjun in the second chapter. And then finally, 2.54, Arjun asks this question. What is the question which Arjuna is asking? Arjuna vacha stita prajnasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava stita dihi kim prabeshita kim ashita vrajeta kim. So this is 5.4 translation. Arjuna said, O Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? You see? How does he speak and what is his language? How does he sit and how does he walk? This is again a state. This is a state of samadhi. Samadhistasya. Arjuna is asking Krishna, saying, how does one get absorbed? How does one get absorbed where the environment doesn't disturb them? How does one get absorbed to the point where, he is able to focus on the objective? So he's asking him, what are the symptoms? What are the symptoms, Krishna, of someone who has internally achieved that stage? What are the symptoms? Then the next verse, Krishna is giving the answer to this question of Arjun. What are the symptoms? Okay, he is giving the precondition and the symptoms both. Text 55. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan atmani eva atmana tushtah sthita prajnastadochate. Translation: the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification, which arise from mental concoction, and when his mind thus purified finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. Three statements. First statement: when a man gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification, which arise from mental concoction. What does the mind do when it is stimulated in an unfriendly environment which is not designed for absorption in Krishna consciousness? What does the mind do? The mind is an expert in acceptance and rejection. Sankalpa, Vikalpa. This is what the mind does. The nature of the mind is very, very expert in accepting and rejecting. When we were in India, the mind wanted to come to America. When we came to America, the mind wants to go back to India. This is the mind. Sankalpa, Vikalpa. Sankalpa, Vikalpa. Constantly accepting, rejecting, accepting, rejecting. So, how does this acceptance and rejection occur at the mental level? It occurs because there's mental concoction. This is mental concoction. The mind is accepting and rejecting. And then a man is developing desires based on this foolish mind, this acceptance and rejection. Oh, okay, the mind is accepting America, so I will go to America. The mind is rejecting America, so let me try and go back to India. Maybe this place is not good for me. Maybe I need to go to some other city. Maybe some other place I need to work elsewhere because this environment is not conducive. That environment could be better than this. This is mental concoction. For most part, there may not be reality. I'm not saying that every situation is mental concoction. There could be challenges. But for most part, it is mental concoction. At the slightest behest of trouble, maybe I should do this. Okay? Maybe I should do this. I should probably move from here, go there. Maybe I should go from here to that place. This is the mind accepting, rejecting. So Krishna is saying, all your desires for sense gratification are because of mental concoction. Okay, it is your mental concoction, and that is why desires are coming for sense gratification. It is concoction. It is not reality, it is concoction. The mind thinks that it's going to be happy. Once you go to the place where the mind is telling us to go, the mind starts telling us that I'm unhappy. Okay. When we were in India, America looked very prospective. The moment we reached here, we started feeling, oh, our family members, it's cold, it's winter, there's snow, it's depressing, and the people come up with all kinds of mental concoctions. Because in India, the mind was telling us that India is not good. Sankalpa Vikalpa, it was rejecting India, accepting America. When it comes to America, it will accept India, reject America. This is mental concoction. This is mental concoction. There's a typical example. Similarly, we find sometimes we speculate. Maybe if we go from here to this place, it will be better. And I'm not denying in some cases it could possibly be required. I'm not trying to generalize every experience which is out there. I'm giving you, for the most part, it's mental concoction, and we should be able to cut that mental concoction when it begins. We should be able to accept the environment. We're going to talk about it 2 sessions from now on what Sri Mahaprabhu wanted us to do. We're going to talk about it. So stop mental concoction, because mental concoction gives rise to sense gratificatory desires. Okay, it is all based on what is comfortable for the body. It has absolutely no basis for this 80-20 proposition which we spoke of. We spoke of the fact of 80% absorption, 20% distraction while doing Krishna conscious activities. The mind has nothing to do with it when it is concocting. The mind is bringing up a concoction. It is a concoction and builds desires. When we are at workplace, if I get promoted, perhaps it's good. Mental concoction. How do you know it's good? How do you know it's bad? We don't know in relationship to our absorption. So why not just desire absorption and allow the external environment to give good and bad effects as it wants? Why not do that? Why not just do our duty by tolerating the environment and allow the environment to give us whatever is required so that Krishna arranges it organically rather than our desiring it. That is mental concoction. Desire 80% absorption. Desire 100% absorption eventually. Right? That's the desire that we want to cultivate. That's the desire we want to really foster and make firm in our hearts. That's the desire. Everything else we tolerate. We don't speculate. We don't speculate whether something is going to be beneficial or not beneficial. We don't. You have to have concrete ideas that something is good for me or not good for me, has to improve my 80% absorption, 100% absorption. That's the benchmark. That's the litmus test for us. We want to be able to qualify our desires based on whether it's aligned or not aligned in terms of absorption. Okay? Go back to verse 4.24. Complete absorption in Krishna consciousness is our motto. It is required for us to move forward. Look at the way the chapters in Bhagavad Gita have been designed. Second chapter, he's summarizing it. He's putting Arjuna in place. Third chapter, he's talking about Karma Yoga. What is it to act in the world? The fourth chapter, he's talking about, knowledge. Isn't it? Action in Krishna consciousness. Knowledge, actually. Fourth chapter is knowledge. Transcendental knowledge. The fourth chapter is transcendental knowledge. So if you act constantly, keeping Krishna in the center, and ultimately reach the point of absorption in Krishna consciousness, then transcendental knowledge is revealed, fourth chapter. And then fifth chapter is, once you have transcendental knowledge, action in Krishna consciousness. How are you going to act? That is fifth chapter. So he is going on a stage-by-stage basis, trying to resolve the main issue of us not being absorbed in Krishna consciousness. That is being dealt with very effectively by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. It's very clear. It's a clear strategy. He is setting the stage in the second chapter. Third chapter, he is talking about keeping him in the center and then acting, Karma Yoga. Fourth chapter, he is saying if you do that, you will reach the point of being able to develop transcendental knowledge, fourth chapter. Fifth chapter, if you have transcendental knowledge of knowing who you are in relationship to me, fifth chapter, action in Krishna consciousness, then you will act in Krishna consciousness. He is going on a stage-by-stage basis. And he is going after setting the stage in the second chapter. There's a key verse, 2.54, 2.55. Stop mental concoction. What are the other sentences? When the mind, thus purified, finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. He is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. That's the definition of samadhi, which Krishna is giving. Now let's go to the solution. Now the solution that we are offering, the first part is what we already spoke, the external strategy. There has to be external strategy. You have to have a plan before you go to work tomorrow morning or Monday morning. Write down a plan of what you want to achieve, which would allow you to have 80% absorption. Have a timeline. Have a certain plan. It doesn't mean that plan is going to get granted by Krishna and his servants. But at least we have made an attempt to keep him in the center. And we have kind of put things in paper, put things in perspective. As a consequence, Krishna notices that we are taking effort. And then Krishna will pitch in. He will help us achieve that objective. It may not be exactly what we planned, but it will be the best of what is best for us. Okay? So have a plan. That is the external strategy. Do not go to work. Do not get yourself absorbed at the workplace without having an internal plan, a plan for you to become completely absorbed. Otherwise, the waves of passion and ignorance that float around will just carry us away. We will have absolutely no chance whatsoever. We will have no chance whatsoever for us to be able to overcome the influence of the modes of nature. Do not take chances. So that's the first step, okay, in being able to manage the external part. The second step is to have an internal practice. The internal practice is given in the Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm going to go there. Now, the most important thing that we want to understand about the prayers which I'm going to share now is the context in which it was provided. In the very early stages of the Yuga, it was not Kali Yuga, the early stages, there was a king by name Prachinabari. This king Prachinabari was a very accomplished ruler to the point where he attained complete transcendental consciousness by engaging in the specific yuga dharma that was prescribed for his age. So the age in which he was in, the yuga dharma was to be able to expertly arrange for fire sacrifices and perform sacrifices. His expertise in the yajna was so good that he was ultimately able to offer all the results to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. By complete absorption in engaging in transcendental yajnas and fire sacrifices, which was in the context of the Yuga Dharma at the time when he was in, he became completely transcendently situated. He was very, very absorbed in this entire process. And the point was that he reached the point of attaining pure love of God. He started experiencing transcendental ecstasy. Now, this king Prachinabari found that he had to move away from, managing the planet. Why? Because he was in transcendental ecstasy. He was advanced in age, and he had very, very powerful 10 worthy sons. The sons of Prachinabari were called the Prachetas. They were very worthy. Why were they worthy? Because they were completely well situated in terms of their goals, well situated in terms of understanding transcendence. They were very, very well situated in all respects to be very qualified as rulers. Okay, very qualified. So Prachinabari requested his sons, the Prachetas. He said, please, now my age has come for me to retire. I'm not able to execute because I'm not able to distinguish what is right and what is wrong, because he's transcendently situated. He has become a Uttamadhikari, but he is not able to see whether something has to be done or not done, and what is right and what is wrong, because everything appears to be, in favor of Krishna consciousness. In other words, he's completely absorbed. So he's practically accepting everything as, completely, in terms of the desire of the Lord. So he is not distracted. He is like a Uttamadhikari Vaishnava, where he is not able to distinguish what is right, what is wrong. And for a king, he cannot do that. The king has to discriminate. So it's very difficult when one is wants to go into very deep absorption. It is very difficult for them to, also engage in this activity of absorbing the mind in executing, the kingdom's duties, becoming, so on and so forth. It's very difficult. So he had many duties as a ruler of the planet, and he was developing ecstasies because of his, the practice, which was qualified for that age. And since he was in such ecstatic consciousness, he didn't want to pursue his rulership anymore. He wanted to hand it over to his children. The children, the Prachetas, being very well qualified, the moment they heard from their father saying, you have to take up the mantleship of the kingdom, you have to take up the rulership of the kingdom, they said, let me go into tapasya. Okay. What did they do? They proceeded to sit under the ocean for 10,000 years to engage in very severe penances. Okay. As they were just proceeding towards such a motive for them to become purified, because they wanted to purify themselves and they wanted to become internally well qualified before coming in and then assuming a role. What did we say in the earlier part of the class? This is the plan. The Prachetas, the moment they were given responsibility where the senses have to be engaging with the world as a king, immediately they became afraid. They said, okay, if I have to engage my senses with the outside world, I have to be prepared. How do I become prepared? I first become internally well situated. I develop consciousness which would allow me to constantly remain in absorption while executing my duties. So the first thing when they heard their father say that, they said, let me go into tapasya so that I can become transcendently situated. All the 10 sons were wonderful. You see, this is real planning. Before coming back into the kingdom, they're saying, let me go and then do this so that then I will not be distracted from the true purpose of life. I will know why I am doing what I am doing. But as they were proceeding towards the ocean, to the body of water, all in a sudden, they saw this beautiful lake, which was extraordinarily still. It was tranquil. It was very calm, very soothing. And they were very attracted by this extraordinary lake, which was so vast, it actually appeared as if it was the ocean itself. All in a sudden, when there were no one around, it was in the middle of the wilderness. All in a sudden, they hear drums, they hear kettles, they hear all kinds of beautiful musical instruments, they hear celebratory sounds, and they become astounded that in the middle of nowhere, they're hearing all these sounds. And lo and behold, who appears? Lord Shiva appears. Lord Shiva, in that particular verse, is described here, right? He is described here as, one moment, I'm just going to, yeah. See, this is the verse. It is verse 20. It is verse 24 and 25 of chapter 4, chapter 24 of the 4th canto. Verse 24-25. Tarhi eva sarasastasman nishkramantam sahagnugam upagyamanam amarapravaram vibhudanugaihi taptahema nikabhyabam sitikantam trilochanam prasada sumukam vikshya prane murjata kautukaha. Translation. The Prachetas were fortunate to see Lord Shiva, the chief of the demigods, emerging from the water with his associates. His bodily luster was just like molten gold. His throat was bluish, and he had 3 eyes which looked very mercifully upon his devotees. He was accompanied by many musicians who were glorifying him. As soon as the Prachetas saw Lord Shiva, they immediately offered their obeisances in great amazement and fell down at the lotus feet of the Lord. So this description, they are suddenly, out of the blue, they are seeing this extraordinary appearance of Lord Shiva, who is golden in form and who has this, what do you call it, Nilakanta. He has this bluish covering because of the drinking and ingesting the hala poison, right? So he has this bluish tinge to his throat as well. He looked extraordinary with his 3 eyes, and he was accompanied by everyone very mercifully. And the moment he appeared, they paid obeisances because it is such a rare, extraordinarily rare sight to be able to see Lord Shiva. They realized that because even the great ascetics who are performing tapasya and so on and so forth, they cannot have darshan of Lord Shiva. It is not easy. It is not easy at all. It is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's very difficult to have darshan of Lord Shiva. And now Lord Shiva, on his own volition, is appearing before the Prachetas. So what was it which was so attractive about the Prachetas? Lord Shiva is describing that. Okay? That is also something which we should know. He says, I'm reading the translation. Lord Shiva continued, any person who is surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, the controller of everything, material nature, as well as the living entity, is actually very dear to me. Lord Shiva says, anyone who is a Krishna Bhakta, who is a Vishnu Bhakta, is very dear to me. So that's the first reason that is being given. So now what is the other reason? The verse prior to that. Lord Shiva said, you are all the sons of King Prachinabhari, and I wish all good fortune to you. I also know what you're going to do. He's saying, I also know what you're going to do, and therefore I'm visible to you just to show my mercy upon you. Okay? So he knew that they were out with a very lofty purpose. They had a transcendental goal, and since it is very rare for people, for human beings to have transcendental goals, Lord Shiva, whose appearance is also very rare in the eyes of everybody, appears simply to give darshan because the objective of the Prachetas itself is very rare. So both are very rare. Appearance of Lord Shiva is very rare. Having transcendental objectives and setting out with such a determined focus is also quite rare. This is real planning. This is real planning. Huge responsibility is being given, and then they are saying, I have to be transcendently situated to execute the responsibility so that we will not get distracted. Lord Shiva becomes very pleased. He appears because he is the spiritual master of the whole world. You see, Lord Shiva, Shiva Tattva and Guru Tattva, they are similar by nature. Lord Shiva is also the predominant spiritual master of the world. He is described as the spiritual master of the world. So he appears to inspire those who want to pursue a life of transcendence. There's a second motivation. Lord Shiva is called Dharma Vatsala. So since the Prachinabari's sons, Prachetas, were wanting to rule the kingdom on earth, and they wanted to establish Dharma, and they wanted to prolong and basically engage in their duties in a very effective way, being a Dharma Vatsala, being someone who is very, very fond of executing Dharma and for supporting those who execute Dharma, Lord Shiva appears to help them. And why does he appear? He is actually telling them certain prayers. He's saying, you want to sit under the ocean, you want to engage in meditating upon the Supreme Lord, you want to do it for such a long period of time. If you have to control your mind, if you have to control your senses, if you have to be able to achieve all of that, let me give you the process. He appears very specifically so that he could educate the Prachetas on the process of being able to fix their mind in the service of the Lord. That is his whole objective. Now we are going to use two prayers from the song which was sung by Lord Shiva, very specifically for our purpose. This is our internal strategy. External strategy, plan. Internal strategy, take the help of the scriptures. The direction of the scriptures, take the help of the scriptures. That's what we're going to do. So let's read the prayers which Lord Shiva gives. Specifically, I have practiced these mantras for several years. And the way I do it is as follows. I've shared this before, but I'm bringing it up again because there are many newcomers, plus it's also going to help refresh the memory of those who have heard this before. The way I practice these mantras is the first thing that I do when I wake up is I chant these two verses for a full 30 minutes. I chant these. I just chant these verses for a full 30 minutes. Okay? And these amazing verses, okay, there are only two verses. I repeat them just as you would repeat any mantra. I just repeat these mantras for 30 minutes. And then I pick up my bead bag. That allows me a greater level of absorption because the first 30 minutes that I spend in being able to chant these two mantras practically settles my mind. You see, my mind becomes very calm. That's the experience I have. I've experienced this, that the mind becomes very calm. It becomes well situated. And then I'm completely able to concentrate. And as I'm able to concentrate, the remaining hour and 20 minutes, normally we take for chanting 16 rounds, that becomes very easy and becomes very productive because I'm able to settle my mind in a very effective, conducive manner. That's the reason why I wanted to share these mantras with you. I wanted to share these mantras because these mantras basically allow us to very quickly reach a point of being able to control the mind and use the mind for the purpose of hearing the holy names. Okay? So the first mantra is, those of you who do not know this, 4th canto, chapter 24, verse 36 and verse 37. Okay? The first mantra is Namo Namo Aniruddhaya Hrishikesha Indriyatmane Namaha Paramahamsaya Purnaya Nibratatmane. The translation: My Lord, as the supreme directing deity known as Aniruddha, you are the master of the senses and the mind. I therefore offer my obeisances unto you again and again. You are known as Ananta as well as Sankarshana because of your ability to destroy the whole creation by the blazing fire from your mouth. This is the first mantra. There are some extraordinarily powerful meanings given by Srila Prabhupada in the purport. I would encourage every one of you to read the purport. I'm also going to talk about it now. The first statement is Namo Namo Aniruddhaya. Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha. Right. So here, basically, we are talking about the four personalities, and of them, Lord Aniruddha is very specifically directed towards the purpose of uh, acting. Acting. You see, action. How do you act? You act with your senses. And how are the senses managed? The senses are managed by the mind. Lord Aniruddha is Hrishikesha Indriyatmane. He is the controller of the mind. He is the supreme principle of the mind. He is transcendental supreme principle of the mind. As a consequence, when we take his name in the mantra and we request him to help us control our mind, we automatically have the ability to bring our mind to a tranquil nature. Okay? It is an automatic principle. Second, Lord Aniruddha is also compared to a Paramahamsa. The word Paramahamsa in this verse very specifically refers to Lord Surya. Very specifically. How does the sun, immaterial of which day it is, immaterial of whether it is cloudy or whether there are no clouds, whether it's pouring, not pouring, the sun does its revolution around wherever it is supposed to go. In the execution of duty, in the execution of dharma, it is unfailing, immaterial of where it is, complete focus, immaterial of where it is. Number two, why is the sun being referred to here? Lord Aniruddha is the principle of the sun. He is considered to be the transcendental equivalent. He is compared to Surya. So it is Lord Aniruddha's potency that Lord Surya acts. So he is compared to the sun here, Paramahamsa. The sun is engaged in giving heat and light to all parts of the world. There are some parts of the world and some areas which are filthy. The sun's light shine on those as well. But does he get affected by it? No. The sun is not affected, but he is able to engage in his duty. He is able to engage in the revolution around the planet. He is able to engage in, enthusing and energizing everyone. And he does not discriminate on filth versus non-filth. He does not get affected. He is transcendentally situated, Paramahamsa. He is Paramahamsa. He is transcendentally situated. He is not getting affected because he is showing heat towards a filthy place. So Lord Aniruddha is practically compared to the sun. We are also indirectly comparing him to the sun and requesting that we develop the ability of being a Paramahamsa. We develop the ability of functioning in this world and not being affected by the world. We develop the ability of withdrawing our senses and our mind and being able to engage them conducively in devotional service. See? Because when we function in an environment here, which is passion and ignorance, it is not conducive. But yet, we want to be able to function and yet not be affected. That is Paramahamsa. Now, the other word which is being used is Purnaya Nibratatmane. Purnaya Nibratatmane very specifically means that he is complete in himself. Ultimately, he is complete in himself. He is completely satisfied in the self. He is Atmanam, Purnaya Nibratatmane. And then he is also situated away from this material creation. He is not affected by it, even though he affects it, which is also our condition. We want to reach the position where we want to be able to control our mind, and we want to be able to absorb our mind and engage in Krishna consciousness. We want to engage effectively in the world. We don't want to give up engaging effectively in the world. At the same time, we don't want to be affected by what we are doing. So this is the other demand. Okay? So this verse is an extraordinary verse. Now, the very specific form of the deity of Lord Aniruddha, that particular literature is found written by the Acharyas of the Sri Sampradaya, because they worship Lord Aniruddha and they worship him very specifically. The Amsa, or rather the Rupa of Lord Aniruddha, is Lord Hayagriva. Right? The Lord with a horse's head. In the Sri Sampradaya, his worship is very, very prominent. Lord Hayagriva's worship. That is the reason why, when we were children, I grew up in a family which was associated with Sri Sampradaya. When we were children, we never used to celebrate Saraswati Puja. Our Saraswati Puja was worshipping Lord Hayagriva. Same principle, being able to engage the mind and absorb the mind in being able to focus, which was a requirement as children, while we are studying, right? And this is exactly what we used to do. We used to worship Lord Hayagriva. And then when I came into the movement, and specifically when, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, when I took up these verses, there were realizations that Lord Aniruddha is Lord Hayagriva, and I also happened to support it by scriptural injunction, which I was able to locate in other areas. There were many scriptural injunctions. So this particular verse is practically indicating that you are approaching Lord Hayagriva, who has got a horse's face, who practically is worshipped in the other sampradayas, Vaishnava sampradayas, for the purpose of controlling the mind. He is worshipped for the purpose of Vidya. Right? Vidya. All kinds of transcendental learning comes from him. So Aniruddha is Lord Hayagriva. He is the superior principle, but then the Rupa, the form he takes, is Lord Hayagriva. Okay, that is information for you, and you can always research more on the web about Lord Hayagriva. Okay, then it's actually very, very powerful. Now the second verse, which we chant every day in the morning, is the next verse. It says, Swarga apavarga dwaraya nityam suchisade namaha namo hiranyaviryaya chaturhotraya tantave. The translation is, my Lord, O Aniruddha, you are the authority by which the doors of the higher planetary systems and liberation are opened. You're always within the pure heart of the living entity. Therefore, I offer my obeisances unto you. You are the possessor of semen, which is like gold, and thus in the form of fire, you held the Vedic sacrifices, beginning with Chaturhotra. Therefore, I offer my obeisances unto you. So, this particular verse is practically indicating the process of Anartha Nivritti. Swarga, Apavarga, Dwaraya. The transcendental worship of Lord Aniruddha would allow us to go from one level of consciousness to the other. Anartha Nivritti is practically being able to move away from the material mode of passion, material mode of ignorance, and even the material mode of goodness, and situate ourselves in transcendental goodness completely. Right? Swarga apavarga dwaraya nityam suchisade namaha nama hiranya viryaya chaturhotraya tantave. So this is the other verse which is being given here, and this is practically indicating the process of being able to go from one level to the other in being able to raise our consciousness. My experience, personal experience, and I can share this to enthuse you, I have no other purpose. My personal experience is these two verses, when I chant them for half hour before beginning my japa of the Mahamantra, they are very effective in raising the consciousness from the lower modes immediately to the mode of goodness. They can. With sufficient practice, they have the ability to raise our consciousness to the mode of goodness. And once you're in the mode of goodness, you have the ability to execute and chant the holy names with greater attention, with with greater absorption, and you're able to hear, and you're able to speak and hear very well. Okay, so text 36 and text 37 of the 4th canto, chapter 24, and again I will repeat these mantras, and I hope all of you can repeat after me, because we do it every week, but I just want to repeat. Namo Namo Aniruddhaya Hishikesha Indriyatmane Namaha Paramahamsaya Purnaya Nibirtatmane Swarga Apavarga Dwaraya Nityam Suchisade Namaha Nama Hiranya Viryaya Chaturhotraya Tantave. These are two verses. Please take it up, and please take it up as a daily practice. Study it, try it out. We should not be skeptical without trying. Take up whatever is being given, and then after taking it up, try and see how it affects your japa, how it affects your ability to focus, how it affects your ability to shake off the influence of sleep, shake off the influence of being exposed to the external environment, and so on and so forth. Those of you, who have young children, teach them these two verses. Encourage them to chant these two verses before they sit down to study. You will see some remarkable changes come in their ability for them to be able to even engage in the mundane studies. Shastric study, there's nothing compared to these two verses. If you want to engage in Shastric study, these two verses are going to help you being able to absorb what is given in the Shastra, and for you to be able to retain the nuances, and for you to be able to speak out the realizations after absorbing ourselves. Okay, I've gone over by 10 minutes, more than my normal time. I want to give some time for one round of questions. So I'm going to stop here. If I determine that there is more to share about these two verses, right, then I will continue again in the following week in just being able to share these two verses, and perhaps give you other ways for you to be able to manage, and improve on your session of japa. Maybe we can just extend it and then go into the remaining two sessions. Okay, I will do that. If I believe that there's more required in terms of information, I will do so. But for today, I just want to stop, and I want to see if there are questions. To quickly summarize, we started out by defining an objective. We said that we have an issue. Srila Rupa Goswami says, Anya Bilashita Shunyam. But our state is not Anya Bilashita Shunyam. Our state is that we have so many objectives. We are not at a stage where we can really say that my heart, I have no other objective other than wanting to follow Krishna favorably. Krishna Anushilanam. That objective is not there. And then, can we also say that we are not, desiring to engage in fruitive activity? Can we also say that we want to constantly focus on relieving ourselves from suffering? We are 80% focused in simply trying to control the mind and the senses. 80% of our energy goes there. 20% goes towards the chanting of japa. In that 20%, some days we don't even do it properly. Then that particular fact, as it goes on from year after year after year, we ultimately show up with nothing, and we get into trouble because we then turn around and say, Krishna consciousness doesn't work. You can hear that statement, Krishna consciousness doesn't work. I tried. And what did you try? 80% absorption in fighting the senses, and 20% in simply being able to absorb ourselves. Now, we want to reverse this ratio. We want to go from 80-20 to 20-80. 20% problems, 80% complete absorption. Right? So external strategy, we write down what we want to achieve. So we don't go into the environment which is out there without knowing why we are going there. At least if you know why we are going there, then we have the ability to take decisions and desire appropriately. Otherwise, if you do not know why you're going there, then we're going to be desiring based on the environment. We wouldn't know why we are desiring something. At least now we know that, okay, I have an objective. Perhaps I need the extra $5,000. It might be worthwhile for me to try here. And if I have that extra $5,000, then I perhaps can skip one more year of waiting for full absorption and for engaging. You see? That kind of calculation will not come if you don't have a proper plan on why you're going to work. That's very important. That's the external strategy. Put it down on paper. Don't speculate. Put it down on paper, saying I need this so that I can have 80% to 100% absorption in Krishna consciousness, where I'm able to devote my time fully. So that's the objective. Then we looked at verses 2.54, 2.55. We identified why we're getting into trouble. So Krishna says very clearly that samadhi is not possible when there's mental concoction and we are trying to satisfy the sankalpa and the vikalpa of the mind. Samadhi is not possible when we're trying to engage in sense gratification based on the demands of the mind. So Krishna says that one who does not have such unwanted desires is well situated. He is completely absorbed. Then we look at the solution. The solution, we looked at the context of sadhakas like us, the prachetas, who are going to try and achieve tranquility, who are going to try and achieve many years of sadhana. We want to pursue on the footsteps of these great souls, and we want to also receive the same benefit they receive from Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva very mercifully comes. He gives them the mantras for them to be able to get out and be able to focus very clearly. Those two mantras are the mantras associated for Lord Aniruddha, which is 4th canto, 24th chapter, 36 and 37. So then we spoke of the fact that we need to use this more in terms of japa. Okay, I stop here. I want to see if there are questions. If there are questions, we will take up those questions. And as I said, I will expand more. Can you provide few examples on how we can internally plan to align work, especially 80-20? Well, the point we want to make here, Raj, is that this is not about internal planning. The idea is that we want to write down what we want to achieve, which should allow us to absorb ourselves in Krishna consciousness. Okay, what is the fundamental need? The fundamental need would be a certain sum of money, which is the reason why we go to work. A certain sum of money, and that sum of money is going to grant us shelter, it is going to grant us soup, shelter, whatever is required is going to meet the objectives of, the other objectives of the family. And we want to be very reasonable in understanding where we are, and we want to keep the desire of 80% absorption in Krishna consciousness central, and we want to be able to achieve it as soon as possible, so that when our body is still healthy, young, we still have a lot of energy, we can use this in the service of Srila Prabhupada. Okay, so that is our internal planning. Write down, and this is practically like your project planning. Have a certain time frame, put down figures, start calibrating, start achieving those. Krishna will help. Whatever is required, Krishna will help, as long as, what do you call it? As long as it is completely aligned. So that's my encouragement to you. Write down, review it, even review it. If you face challenges, feel free to reach out. I will share whatever little I can in terms of insight. Okay, how can we differentiate between tests and obstacles? How can we differentiate between tests and obstacles? There really need be no necessity for distinguishing tests and obstacles. We needn't. Because the most important thing is not so much that we want to speculate on whether it's a test or it's an obstacle. We want to focus on the fact that something is manifested in the environment, and that particular aspect of our life is very specifically needed for us to be able to move forward. This attitude of accepting the environment, we're going to talk about it in great detail in future in the fourth session. Okay, we're going to talk about it. So there is no need to distinguish whether something is a test. We want to speculate Krishna is testing us, or whether there's an obstacle. We don't want to do that. We want to simply accept each and everything as necessary for being able to move forward, and then we slowly, steadily, we are able to process it, and we are able to get out of it. Okay, an obstacle and a test, it's actually it's very difficult to distinguish the two, and we don't need to do that. We don't need to. There should be no mental speculation. We accept it as the arrangement of the Lord, even though it may not be. We accept it. That would allow us to think through and get out of such situations. Can you explain at what stage do we come to know about our true relationship of Krishna? Is it only at the elevated stage of bhava and prema? The relationship starts unfolding at the very stage of anartha nivritti. Once anartha nivritti is over and one becomes fixed in their absorption, then this 80-20, where 80% absorption in chanting of the holy names, 80% absorption in Krishna consciousness, then the person starts making rapid progress. During that stage, the inclinations and everything else start unfolding, but it does not unfold fully and clearly until the stage of higher levels of ruchi, ashakti, and bhava. Okay, so you don't have to go all the way to bhava. Bhava is the ultimate stage, but this starts. So there is very little space or room between developing, what do you call it, fixed consciousness and absorption, and developing taste and developing attachment, and actually reaching ecstatic transformations. There is very little room for that. In other words, it happens in some cases quite successively and quite fast, because of the fact that 100% of the chanting, 100% of the person's energy is going towards that particular objective. And that is our goal. Today's class is all about being able to focus and reach 100% usage of our time without being distracted by the mind. Okay, any other question? Comment, question, both are welcome. You're welcome. So we'll give a couple of more minutes, and then we'll see if there are any questions whatsoever. Yeah, many of you are new to this platform of listening to classes through Google Events, perhaps. And all you need to do is to be able to click on the Q&A. If you move your cursor to the left-hand side, you see a Google button, and then below that, you have Q&A. If you click on that, it allows you to type in questions. So you're welcome. So if you have the ability to type, type out. If not, you can reach out, because in the future this would be very productive. Especially those of you who belong to Purnachandra Prabhu's Bhakta Vriksha. I don't know, perhaps you have better means of reaching out to him. He can even give you guidance and help if you're wanting to ask questions. He can even post the questions on your behalf, or you could send it out too. I'm sorry. You're welcome, Rajagopal Prabhu. You're welcome. Some of you have practiced this in the past. Some of you have experienced relief, have experienced improvements. So I would encourage everyone to try. Try and see how it helps you. Okay, Vaibhav, I had a question regarding the form of Lord Aniruddha. The verse suggests that he is associated with the sun god, a prototype for the sun god. Yet we associate Lord Ram with the sun, and he isn't in the standard 10 incarnations of Vishnu. Can you explain? Okay, the prototype, there's a difference here. The principal connection of Lord Ram with the sun is that he is born in the Surya Vamsha. Krishna is born in the Chandra Vamsha, in lineage. But in the case of Lord Aniruddha, he is the sun god. He is the manifestation of the sun god. In practically, we are saying that Surya has a spiritual form, that is Lord Aniruddha. But in the case of Lord Ram, he is born in Surya Vamsha, so we associate the sun god with Lord Ram, no doubt. He is born in the Vamsha. But in the case of Lord Aniruddha, it is the sun god, but this is the spiritual prototype. That's the difference. The form or the rupa of Lord Aniruddha is Lord Hayagriva. Hope that answers your question, Vaibhav. Feel free to ask if you're not satisfied. I'm just going to give 5 more minutes and then we will end. Is Lord Hayagriva the material manifestation, whereas Lord Aniruddha is the pure spiritual form? No. Lord Hayagriva is the pure spiritual form. Lord Hayagriva is the pure spiritual form. Lord Aniruddha is the specific expansion. So, for example, when Krishna expands into Balaram, Sri Balaram expands into Mula Sankarshana. Mula Sankarshana expands into Mahasankarshana. And then there is Narayana, Mahavishnu, which is the Shirodakashai Vishnu, Garbhodakashai Vishnu. I'm sorry, there is Karanodakashai Vishnu, Garbhodakashai Vishnu, Shirodakashai Vishnu. Lord Aniruddha, very specifically, is Shirodakashai Vishnu, the super soul. Okay, that is the other manifestation of Lord Aniruddha. What is the specific form which is being addressed in this verse of that super soul? That form is Lord Hayagriva. As the controller of the mind, as the controller of the senses, that form is Lord Hayagriva. So we are talking about the principle. So we have Vasudev, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha. That is the principle. When that principle of Lord Aniruddha, he manifests as the super soul. The same principle of Lord Aniruddha is also, he manifests as Lord Hayagriva, as the controller of the mind, and as, you know, as equivalent to the Surya Dev, because Surya Dev and the transcendental Rupa, or the form of Surya Dev, so to speak. Does it make sense? If not, you can write to me. But if you have more questions, I'm more than welcome to, you're more than welcome to ask. So the forms which Krishna expands into of Vasudev, Sankarshana, Aniruddha, and Pradyumna, the same forms have responsibilities. The responsibilities are Karanodakashai Vishnu. Sankarshana expands into Karanodakashai Vishnu, Garbhodakashai Vishnu, Pradyumna, and then you have the Aniruddha principle, which is Shirodakashai Vishnu, super soul. The same personality of Lord Aniruddha, he appears in the form of Lord Hayagriva when he is being asked and requested for help to control the mind. Does it make sense? It's a certain aspect of him. The same Shirodakashai Vishnu is the super soul. He is the specific form who transforms himself into different avatars. If they have to descend, they descend from Shirodakashai Vishnu. Well, yes, I would agree it's a subtle topic because it is in the spiritual sky. It's very subtle. Okay, I don't see any more questions. I'm hoping that it was not because you didn't know how to ask in terms of the Google events. If there are any questions, feel free to post the questions on Facebook. There is a sandhini.com page. You can go to sandhini.com, my website, and from there you can go into Facebook, and then you can send out a request to become a member of that page. That's where we make all the announcements for classes and everything. You can post your questions on that page under this particular lecture, and I would be very happy to, see if I can assist you in any manner. Okay, so we'll stop here. So thank you very much. Thank you so much for joining us. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.